So I have this, I was telling somebody this week, I don't remember who, but I have this task that the Lord has given me for a long time. And the task is to unmask the enemy. So this morning, I knew what I was going to talk about for a few days, but this morning it was like ridiculous how things hit me. And I got up and I was like, okay, I'm getting ready, and I'm praying and I'm worshiping, and then I'm getting short of breath. And then I'm like, okay, what's going on? I'm like, Lord, forgive me. What did I do? Repenting and seeking. And then I start having sharp pains in my side. I'm like, well, that's random. And then having the shortness of breath. And then I start having chest pains. And I'm like, well, I don't have heart problems anymore. And then my stomach is aching. And this isn't all at the same time. This is just random. The shortness of breath was pretty consistent. And I'm like, Lord, what is going on? And then I'm starting to get foggy. Like, I feel like I have a headache, but I don't have a headache. And my brain just I feel like there's this haze in front of me, and I'm going, what in the world is happening? And so I messaged Cindy. She's part of my prayer team. So I messaged her. I was like, I might need some prayer before service. I'm not sure if this is me or if this is everybody else. Because words of knowledge are moments where God allows us to feel something for someone else. So I'm going through it, and I tell you what, my stomach still feels it, and I still feel short of breath. So if I keep taking breaths, that's why, because somebody in here is still feeling the weight, because it's not mine. Now I know it's not mine. This morning, because there were so many different things, I was unsure. You ever had that happen? There's so many things, you're just unsure what to do or what it is. We all have these moments in our life where we just don't know. You know, the greatest fear that man has is the fear of the unknown. Why? Because you don't know. You don't know what's to come. You don't know what's going to happen. You don't know how things are going to respond. You don't know if you're going to be okay in it. You don't know if your kids are going to be okay. You don't know if your parents are going to be okay. You don't know. So one of the greatest fears of man is the fear of the unknown, which is one reason why God gave me the mandate that I have on unmasking the enemy. Because if you don't know, you just don't know. That's why Jesus is on the cross and people are gambling for his clothes, and he says, Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they're doing. And I think we all have moments of that as well, where we will do something without realizing what the consequences are. It could be good, could be bad. There's this book that I like by Liebscher. I can't remember his first name. Liebscher? I think it's Liebscher. Might be Bill Johnson. But it's called Good or God. There's things that are... John Bevere? Oh. See, I read so many books, I don't know. Or I try to. Anyways, so John Bevere, Good or God. That book, it talks about how there are things that are good, but it doesn't mean it was God. There are plenty of things that we have a desire to do that would be good things, but it doesn't mean it was God's thing for you. It might have been God's thing for someone else. Like even in the church, we tend to do that, where we will all feel and sense something that is needed within the church. And because it's not there, we think that it's our job to take on that responsibility. When in fact, God is telling you that that's something that needs to happen, and we need to look at who can be positioned into that to bring them to life. And the things that I'm talking about today, I am completely 100% guilty of. Because sometimes we just don't know. And we don't always understand. So when I was thinking about what I was going to talk about today, I was like, Lord, this seems so basic. Until it wasn't. So I thought that was fun. But when I was laying in bed this morning before all this other stuff happened, where I was feeling all these random things for all y'all people, it just shows you how much I love you, that I feel your pain. And most people here know that I'm not a feeler. If I feel something spontaneous, it's a rare occasion normally. But when he gives me words of knowledge that are bam, 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 like that, God's doing something in a mass way today. And I think he already did. He already showed that. The different levels of things that people needed to deal with here at the altar in the midst of worship. Okay? So we can continue to move forward, and now I want to bring an awareness to some of this stuff. But when I was still laying in bed, I felt like I was riding on the waves. Anybody ever felt that? You ever been on a boat or something and you're like, feel like you're still riding it after you get off because it's been kind of bouncy? Or you ever waded in the water and you just ride with the wave? That's what it felt like when I was laying in bed when I woke up. And it felt so good. Because I knew that the Spirit was moving in a wave. That's what he was telling me. He said, I'm moving in a wave. And we have to catch the wave and ride the wave. Sometimes it takes us places we don't expect. But can we be okay not knowing where we're going completely, so long as we're riding with his wave? That had nothing to do with my notes, so here you go. So I have these random things that the Lord really highlights to me, and he gives me very direct instructions on things that I shouldn't do. Sometimes I'm unsure, but there are times where it's very direct. So one of the things that I've really had to learn is what is sin? So I did a deep dive into sin this week. And there were moments where I just had to stop and really say, God, Lord, forgive me. I feel like no matter what I do, I continue to do things I shouldn't do. Anybody else ever feel that? Don't get me wrong. I think as you grow in what you understand the Lord says in his word, that the things that you realize that you shouldn't do changes, because we didn't realize that was something we shouldn't do. We all have this understanding that, well, we shouldn't commit adultery because that's definitely not right. We shouldn't just drink to get drunk, right? Because that's not good. It's the Bible. The word says not to be a drunkard, and there's these different kinds of sin. I shouldn't murder someone, because thou shalt not murder and all, You know what I think? What I think is kind of crazy about that particular commandment is how much we know that we shouldn't stab somebody with a physical knife, but we're more than willing to stab them in the back with a worded one. So how far do we take the word, thou shalt not murder? Now I got a handful of people who are like, I have to repent. Okay. 1 John 3 says, everyone who practices sin also practices lawlessness. And sin is lawlessness. Sin is that which opposes God. If it is the opposite of God's law, it's sin. Sin is also an unloving disobedience. I love like Jesus, but I won't be obedient. It's still a sin. Disobedience is a sin. So as I figured out specific things the Lord has told me, for one, I'm not supposed to eat sugar. It's an easy one for me to point out because everybody likes eating sugar. But he told me specifically I'm not supposed to eat it. So if I go and I turn around and eat a cake, I'm in disobedience to God. So please don't buy me a cake for my birthday. Unless it's sugar-free. I actually don't like cake, so please don't buy me one anyway. So for me, it's a form of sin. Throughout the Old and New Testament, sin means deviating from obedience to God's character. And I loved that description because that means that we should know God's character to know if we're being obedient to Him. So if we're being hateful when God's told us to love everybody, then we're being disobedient. If we're taking something from our neighbor without asking, we're being disobedient because God wouldn't do that. The one that hit me the most was adultery. How many are ickied by hearing the word adultery? Every time I would hear that kind of word, it would be the ickiest feeling to me. I'm like, ugh. Until you realize that we've all committed adultery. It doesn't change how icky it feels. But you have to understand what the word adultery means in the word. So I have a visual that I want you guys to walk through. So I'm going to walk you through a visual. I want you to close your eyes. Don't fall asleep. If I see you bow your head in a different way, I'll call you out. Not really, just kidding. So I want you to close your eyes and I want you to picture this. And I want you to understand some of the things that tempt you the most, whether it's, lies that the devil tells you is actually a temptation as well. Because if you believe it, you have now become susceptible to the temptation of the liar. So I want you to close your eyes and I want you to see yourself walking down a narrow road. And along this road, there are many trees along all of the sides. And the grass is nice, plush, and green. And there's your favorite kinds of trees and animals and flowers. Everything that surrounds what you would see as this amazing place to travel down. And as you're walking down the road, you feel the sun's warmth that's shining on your face. Your favorite weather surrounding you. And just you and the path that the Lord has put before you. And you're walking down this path. And you see this house toward the side of the road, and the house looks like any other house that you'd see in a city, but you feel this draw toward this house, and you say to yourself in the moment, well, no, I can't look at it because I'm following my path. And then the day starts to shift into the twilight of the evening, and you stop at a bench right outside of the house to have a bite to eat. And as you sit on the bench, you open up your lunch and you eat the sandwich that you made prior to taking your walk. And as you finish eating with the setting of the sun, you get back up and finish your path. And standing there in front of you is a person. And this person is absolutely beautiful and enticing. And they have a name across their chest. And their appearance is just very stunning. And you see the name and you know that it's not something that you should be a part of. But they come to you with this stunning appearance, and they give you a kiss on the cheek. And they speak to you with a brightened face with peace offerings, talking about how good things will be with them and that it's okay to be with them. And they smell very pleasant. The fragrance is intoxicating. And they've prepared their house for you to come and dine with them and come and have a drink. And they speak of how it is night and you should just stay. And the desire to be with them and the care that they are speaking to you sounds so good to your ears. So you follow and you go to their house. And as you go in, they persuade you even further into doing what you didn't originally wanted to do. And you fall asleep. And when you wake up, you realize where you are. And there's a startling voice that you hear asking where you had gone. And this voice is coming from the path that you had strayed off of. Can you see it? You can open your eyes. Now let me read you Proverbs chapter 7. My son, keep my words and treasure my commandments within you. Keep my commandments and live, and my teaching as the apple of your eye. Bind them to your fingers, write them on the tablet of your heart. Say to wisdom, you are my sister, and call understanding your intimate friend, that you may keep from the adulteress, from the foreigner who flatters with her words. For at the window of my house I looked through the lattice, and I saw among the naive, and discerned among the youths a young man lacking sense, passing through the street near her corner. And he takes the way to her house in the twilight, in the evening, in the middle of the night, and in the darkness. And behold, a woman comes to meet him dressed as a harlot and cunning of heart. She is boisterous and rebellious. Her feet do not remain at her home. She is now in the streets, now in the squares, and lurks by every corner. So she seizes him and kisses him. With a brazen face, she says to him, I was due to offer peace offerings. Today I have paid my vows. Therefore I have come out to meet you, to seek your presence earnestly, and I have found you. I have spread my couch with coverings, with colored linens of Egypt. I have sprinkled my bed with myrrh, aloes, and cinnamon. Come, let us drink our fill of love till morning. Let us delight ourselves with caresses, for my husband is not at home. He has gone on a long journey. He is taking a bag of money with him. At the full moon he will come home. With her many persuasions she entices him. With her flattering lips she seduces him. Suddenly he follows her, as an ox goes to the slaughter, or as one in fetters to the discipline of a fool, until an arrow pierces through his liver, as a bird hastens to the snare, so he does not know what it will cost him his life. Now therefore, my sons, listen to me and pay attention to the words of my mouth. Do not let your heart turn aside to her ways. Do not stray into her paths. For many are the victims she has cast down, and numerous are all her slain. Her house is the way of Sheol, descending to the chambers of death. Do you see my correlation to your visual to the adulterous woman? So I was intrigued the other day, and I looked up, I have the study Bible, and so it underlines specific word, and in this particular verse, in verse 5, it had adulteress highlighted. So adulteress in the Hebrew is number 2114, which is zur, which means to turn aside, to be a foreigner, profane, to commit adultery, to be a stranger, to go astray. There's actually a big paragraph of what this actual word means. It also means something that is outside of the law of God. It's a person outside the family. The estranged way that Job's guests and servants viewed him. I found it very intriguing The definition of the adulterous woman had to do with being anything that was outside of the law of God. A person outside of the family. So when we listen and we follow the adulteress or something that is outside of God's law, which would be a lie, we become estranged. We have followed somebody that is not of the family of God. Our agreement to following this, in verse 10, it talks of the harlot. And harlot, that Hebrew word is zanah, which means to commit adultery, harlot, to fornicate, improper relationships with other nations or other gods. But it also means it's a breach of the Lord's covenant. So when we fall into following the lie, we are now in breach of God's covenant promise. Do you see where I'm going here? Like the word sin, our concept of sin, really needs to shift into an understanding that what he's saying is that stop committing adultery against me. The reason he says you have left your first love is because we continue to follow in the way of the world. And when we've continued to follow in the way of the world, we are consistently committing adultery against God. And are discussed over the concept of, well, if anybody ever committed adultery against me, their butt is gone. You know how many people would say that kind of thing? It doesn't matter. They have broken their covenant, right? It's one of the reasons that God allowed for divorce, right? He said he doesn't want divorce. Let me be very clear. But you know why? I mean, does it make more sense why God doesn't want a divorce? Because he doesn't want to divorce you. He doesn't want you to divorce him. Nothing can separate you from the love of God. God will always be there and always forgive you. And in the midst of it, over and over and over and over again, we're like, well, I'm okay to just do it this one time. It's a special occasion. But he told me not to. And then we're like, why can't I hear him better? Why can't I see him clearly? Why am I struggling from the day to day? You know why? You know what the Lord says about when you cast something out and then you leave it empty? It comes back 7 times stronger. Well, every time that you've been told not to do something and yet you go back to it, it's coming 7 times stronger. And then we wonder why it's so much harder this time than the last time. This is what happens with addicts. When you have an addiction problem and you've decided to stop, and then you are like, well, it was just this one moment because this was a celebration of your birthday, somebody else's, whatever it is. It doesn't really matter what the celebration is. If God told you not to do it and you're not supposed to do it, the addiction is going to be back that much stronger the next time and make it that much harder to stop. It is very much, the word also says that a believer that has gone astray, it is easier for him to go through the eye of a needle than to come back. Why is that? Because he had dropped everything of the world before and decided to go back. And so what happened? 7 times stronger, it's harder. Are we okay? Am I stressing people out yet? I'm not trying to stress you out. I just reject stress in the name of Jesus. So there are, from here, there needs to be an understanding of the fruit of the Spirit. So I have a bucket of water here. And I want to show you what happens in your brain. You know, another commandment we have is to take all thoughts captive. So I want to show you what happens when you don't. I'm picking green because I'm wearing green. This is our mind when we have been redeemed. Okay? So we believe in Jesus. Our mind is clear. We've accepted his salvation and his deliverance, so we have a clear mind. This is our thoughts. Negative thoughts. This is the things that the devil tries to tell you that are not truth. Right? Notice that the thoughts are not in the mind right now. They can be suggested, but they're not sitting in the mind. Okay? So when we're taking those thoughts captive, it is stuck where it belongs. In this little bottle here. But what happens when we don't take our thoughts captive is it allows for a dribble to come in. And then what happens? It's still mostly clear, right? But there's this little drop in there that doesn't necessarily affect the entire mind right now, but we have accepted the thought and allowed for it to linger. So we've received it, and now it is slowly affecting a clear mind. So then what happens, because the devil doesn't like to just hit you once, he likes to do what? Well, that one worked, so let me give another one. Oh, they're hanging on to that one too because they hung up to the first one, so I'm going to give them another one. Oh, and they're doing something else, so hold on. Those thoughts are still lingering, but now something else is going on. Now something else in their life is happening. So let's give them a different kind of thought. And let's see if they allow for that one to stay. And at first we might be okay, and we might, even though those have kind of affected us, we're still able to linger on. But what happens when we don't? We're slowly losing clarity of mind. Until at some point, now we've got two different kinds of thoughts from two different areas of our life. And now it's becoming harder and harder to take thoughts captive because we've already allowed one of them. And then the next one comes, and the next one comes. And now, we haven't been able to contain it. So this one just freely starts going through until it's become so absorbed that your clarity of mind is gone. And now we're just completely flooded with all those things that have made it foggy. Now the ability to think clearly is nearly impossible. Because all those thoughts have been gathered and they've affected every aspect of the clear mind. So then when that kind of stuff happens in the beginning, when we become believers, it becomes very easy. It seems very easy in the beginning, and then as you grow, you're like, man, there's all this other stuff too. We all know that happens. As you learn, as you grow, you're like, oh, there's all this other stuff going on too. So then, because all this stuff starts getting cloudy, you still have all these memories from your past. But the memories aren't the same as regular thoughts because they're solid. They've been structured. The things that continuously lied for me when I was growing up, I was always told I was stupid. So I believed and allowed it to be a stronghold in my life. I didn't know I had to break a stronghold. I didn't know that was even a thing. The word stronghold was out of my vocabulary, so I didn't know. But what is a stronghold? So a stronghold is a building or a wall that has been built over time. If you look up the definition of stronghold or look up an image of a stronghold, it would be a massive tower. Okay, so there's the Lord is a strong tower. But the enemy likes to manipulate and make you see a false strong tower. So these little things, as we allow thoughts to invade, these become more dominant. Can you see it in there? No? But it's a solid piece of your history in your life that happened even from the time you're born. So as these different things, these different thoughts that we've allowed, these different lies, the originations of why we allowed those thoughts are solidly stuck in there. Because our ability to stand, God gives us strength, but as things happen to us, we tend to lose joy. And the joy of the Lord is your strength. So if you've lost joy, that's why you don't have strength. Do you understand? Are we seeing what I'm saying? Like these little things can move wherever they want to move, but they're hard to see, especially when we've allowed thoughts to consume our mind. So what God does is he likes to use those things that invaded our life to rob our identity. And he likes to scoop them out. And you still have these memories of things that have happened in your life, but they don't have to affect your thinking anymore. As Jesus becomes the dominant in your life, the focus, the thing, keep your focus on Christ. All that other stuff starts clearing up and it all becomes clear again. So those thoughts have to be taken away. We have to capture those thoughts so that they can't stay. And then God is allowed to purify us in a different way. These thoughts are a part of adultery. The adulterous woman has to do with not taking your thoughts captive and allowing for the manipulation. The desire that the devil wants is to manipulate you into not believing who you truly are. So he will bring something about that is a temptation specifically for you. It's not for everybody. The conviction that I feel about sugar is not everybody's conviction. Okay? The way that the Lord has spoken to me on specific ways that I need to live my life is not the same as the next person. I have to restrict my ability to eat soy. Why? Because the Lord told me to limit my soy intake. If I just ate soy after every meal of the day, I would be living in disobedience to God, therefore committing adultery on my love. Do you see what I'm saying? Like this is the tie that Mark was talking about. This is one of the ties. The renewing of your mind is the highlight of your ability to be a true person of your identity. Your identity becomes tied to what you believe. I believed I was stupid for half my life because I was told it over and over again until I didn't. And I don't think I'm stupid anymore. I have enough intelligence to have looked Hebrew words up. It does take some skill. It took me a while. But thank you, Rabbi Shoshana, for your marvelous teachings. So our need for self-control is a highlight. We desire the fruit of the Spirit. Did you know self-control is one of them? Self-control is it is the only one that says self in front of it, which means you have to do it yourself. It is produced through your own personal willingness. You know why I say it like that? Because some people are like, I just can't. Well, you can, but you just won't. Because it's all within your will power. So God doesn't do anything against your will, which is why self-control has to do with your own will. You're willing to let it move you. So we have to be willing to take control. Now, this doesn't mean be controlling over every aspect of everybody else's life on top of your life, because that's a spirit of control. That's not self-control. So I've been there. I've done that, okay? Anybody that's been a mom, I think you know what it feels like to have to be in control of something at some point of your children's lives. It's just what happens. No, you are not going outside to play by yourself. You're 2. That's not happening, okay? So it's a little bit different, but self-control is one of the hardest things, one of the hardest fruits, one of the hardest pieces of the fruit that we actually act on. But self-control there has to be a balance of the fruit. There's a reason why it's called one fruit. They are equally balanced. So if you have one fruit, if you have kindness, but you have no self-control, you still don't have the fullness of the fruit of the Spirit. So there's a need for all of those to be balanced. It's our ability to, self-control is defined as the ability to control oneself. In particular, one's emotions and desires, or the expression of them in one's behavior, especially in difficult circumstances. So our ability to have self-control even when it's hard. The disciples, if you know anything about how they died, the abilities had to have some serious self-control, even in their death, for God. I would die for my friend, right? I would die for my friend. What happens if you have to suffer for them? And it's a harsh reality, but it's truth. We can't control our ability to desire sugar. How are you going to allow somebody to fillet you for God? Now, in America, that would be more of people saying a lot of horrible things about you that is not true. They would be butchering your name, right? That's how we take a lot of that stuff, especially in America. Because there's not true suffering much in America for God. But there is a passion to help those who are. Because we see things that are happening in other countries and we say we want to help that, which is beautiful. So I want to read off some scriptures that talk about self-control and how this is going to affect you. 2 Timothy 1:7 says, "For God gave us a spirit not of fear, but of power and love and self-control." He showed power, he's shown love, and self-control. Galatians 5:22 and 23. The fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. Proverbs 25:28 says, "A man without self-control is like a city broken into and left without walls." Like, seriously, I'm reading that one again because you guys need to understand what happens to your life when you don't use self-control. Proverbs 25:28. "A man without self-control is like a city broken into and left without walls." So basically he's saying it's a destroyed city. If you know anything about the Old Testament, most cities had walls. Most cities had walls that would be built around them. You would have to go through the city gates. You don't have gates without walls, okay? So self-control is leaving yourself vulnerable for destruction. That's the, I don't know, it's not an REN version because I'm not Ren. Well, I mean, I guess I am. You know, man and woman joined together, and they shall be they created Adam and Eve, and they shall be called Adam, right? So, same thing. So, if you're married, you have your husband's name. Sorry, whether you like it or not. So, okay, Keith, you ever 1 Peter 4:7. Keith liked that. He's like, yes, call her Keith. 1 Peter 4:7 says, "Be self-controlled and sober-minded for the sake of your prayers." Be self-controlled and sober-minded for the sake of your prayers. I just can't pray. I just don't know. I really like the Complete Jewish Bible version. It says, "The accomplishing of the goal of all things is close at hand. Therefore, keep alert and self-controlled so that you can pray." Be alert and self-controlled so that you can pray. Our ability to have some self-control affects our prayers. It makes me curious of if maybe that's one of the reasons people don't like to pray, is because those are the ones that don't have any self-control. I mean, did that hit anybody like it hit me? Because it hit me like a ton of bricks when I read that one. I was like, I really need some better self-control. And we go to this. 1 John 3. "See how great a love the Father has bestowed on us, that we would be called children of God. And such we are. For this reason, the world does not know us because it did not know him. Beloved, now we are children of God, and it has not appeared as yet what we will be. We know that when he appears, we will be like him, because we will see him just as he is. And everyone who has this hope fixed on him purifies himself, just as he is pure. Everyone who practices sin also practices lawlessness, and sin is lawlessness. You know that he appeared in order to take away sins, and in him there is no sin. No one who abides in him sins. No one who sins has seen him or knows him. Little children, make sure no one deceives you. The one who practices righteousness is righteous, just as he is righteous. And the one who practices sin is of the devil, for the devil has sinned from the beginning. The Son of God appeared for this purpose, to destroy the works of the devil. No one who is born of God practices sin, because his seed abides in him, and he cannot sin because he is born of God. By this, the children of God and the children of the devil are obvious. Anyone who does not practice righteousness is not of God, nor the one who does not love his brother. For this is the message which you have heard from the beginning, that we should love one another, not as Cain, who was of the evil one and slew his brother. And for what reason did he slay him? Because his deeds were evil and his brothers were righteous. Here it talks about how anyone who loves God does not practice sin. There is a difference between unintentional sin and intentional sin. There are things that are premeditated. We're going to have a birthday card party, and they're going to have awesome sweets, and I'm going to eat them because it's a birthday. Okay, like I said, this is one that is a conviction for me, so that's why I can use it. If it convicts you, I love you. But there is a difference between unintentional sin and intentional sin. When you know it is intentional, if you didn't know, you didn't know. But once you know, you are now accountable. You have to change the way we see sin. Because to us, one sin is different from the other. Well, it's not as bad as sin as this one. I didn't kill anybody. Not in your hands, but in your heart. Or in your mind, with the words that were spoken, with the thoughts that were taken into account without taking them captive. So we come through to repent of our sinful ways, and we say, Lord, forgive me of being such an adulterous wife, because I disobeyed you. And he's the one that matters the most. I think it would be easier to overcome some of those thoughts that come to our mind if we understood that what's happening right now is temporary. Our goal is eternity. To eternally worship and be with our Creator. Then the things of today or tomorrow would not bother us so much. If we would not focus on those and focus on eternity. When Stephen was being stoned to death, he saw God standing. Can we do that when we're being stoned? That's my challenge for you. Will you do that when you're being stoned? Will you still see God standing and watching and be your focus? No matter what somebody else says, no matter what somebody else is doing, no matter where somebody else is going, no matter what you're feeling that day, no matter how good your job is or how good your friends have been, can you still see Jesus? Can you still focus on God when you're being stoned? Different way of looking at stoning in the U.S., I get it. And it hurts. It hurts. The amount of pain that my heart was in when I felt that spirit of grief for that many people, it hurts. The things that people say can hurt. But the things that other people say or other people do isn't as important as what God says about you. So if you can grasp what He is saying, if you can remember the words that he has spoken, and none of the other stuff will matter the way that it matters now, or the way that it has mattered. I don't want to live my life worried about somebody else. Not in that way. I want to love people. I want to help see people succeed and fulfill everything that God has for them. But I don't want to sit around worrying about what somebody else thinks of me. Because if they've invaded my thoughts, then I've strayed from my first love. Because my first thought should not be them. It should be him. If I can't pray, if I can't read, if I can't focus on what God is saying because they're stuck in my thoughts, there is a desperate need for letting that person go, forgiving that person, or for loving that person. Self-control. Taking your thoughts captive. I just want to yell and tell everybody, stop being an adulterous wife. But it's a reality. If we can grasp the truth behind the interpretation of those words, we can grasp how much God cares about the way that you think. And how those thoughts can turn you in a direction you don't want to go. Because ultimately, we don't want to go there, but we also don't want to take our thoughts captive either. So we're going to practice self-control. I have a gift of peace. At least I've been told that many times. And I believe it. And I know I can impart that. But self-control is done by yourself. The rest of these pieces of the fruit can be in abundance in one person, and they bless and impart some of that. But self-control is all you. And I think a lot of us struggle, and I'm finishing up here, but I think a lot of us struggle because we have so many hardships about pride. And what is pride? Anything that has to do with yourself. Whether that's self-hatred, whether that's insecurities. Insecurity is just a different form of pride. Pride doesn't always mean that you're full of yourself. Sometimes it means that you don't think good of yourself. It's an insecurity, but it's still a form of pride. Why? Because it still has to do with you. Why can't other people be allowed to connect with you? Because you're too insecure. So you don't let people connect with you. It's still an issue of pride. But self-control is not about pride. Self-control is about surrendering and not allowing for the opportunity of a foothold. Because that's the open door. Lord, close all the doors that need to be shut and open all the doors that need to be open. We'll practice some self-control and he can truly shut that door. But some of it is just waiting on you to do that. And for some of us, it was a matter of getting rid of some of that grief that's overwhelmed us over and over again throughout our life. Grief inherently isn't all bad. Let me be clear. I called out a spirit of grief. There's a difference between having a spirit of grief and grieving. There is a moment of time where we need to weep. Because he said, and weep with those who weep, mourn with those who mourn, laugh with those who laugh. Whatever the situation calls for, but those are moments. Grieving should never be years on end. It should never be months on end. But there's times where we need to allow ourselves to grieve. And there are times for us to let the grieving go and not allow for it to hold on to us and become a stronghold instead of something that was supposed to be temporary. Because we lose something. Anytime there's some kind of loss of something, there's going to be some form of grieving that comes with it. But it should never be extended amount of time. I've watched people grieve over being healed. Sounds very strange to those of us who wouldn't have done that. But when you're so used to something for so long, and you feel like you've become dependent on something for so long, and you break the dependency, there can be a form of grieving. There's healthy grieving and unhealthy grieving. So, did that make sense? I want to make sure that was understood, because that one can be confusing.
We want to pray for you. Send us a message with your prayer requests through Facebook or email and let us know how we can pray for you today. Also, let us know how this message impacted your life. I love you. God loves you. Shalom.